Make
The
sure that
dusty
insignia is
convoy
aligned
rolled through the
properly with the
gates of
sleep
forward
seam.
operating
Yes,
base
understood.
Phoenix.
Good, now check the other
As
side.
the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the compound, Staff Sergeant Zara Khalil stepped down from the transport truck, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and surveyed her new assignment with carefully neutral eyes. After 8 years in the shadowy world of signals intelligence, she had specifically requested the most mundane posting available: basic communications support at a relatively quiet forward operating base, Lieutenant. Colonel Hassan watched the new arrivals from his office window, a habit he'd developed over 3 deployments. Something about the woman caught his attention, not her appearance, which was deliberately unremarkable, but the way she moved. While other new personnel clustered together, craning their necks to take in their surroundings, she positioned herself with clear sightlines to multiple exits and kept her back to solid cover. Old habits, he mused, recognizing the unconscious behavior of someone with extensive field training. Sergeant Khalil, welcome to Phoenix Base, Hassan said as he approached the group during orientation. I see you're assigned to our communications center. Pretty routine work here, mostly supply coordination and status reports. Zara nodded politely. That's exactly what I was hoping for, sir. I requested the simplest assignment available. Her voice carried a slight weariness that made Hassan wonder what she was trying to escape. During the welcome briefing, Hassan noticed how Zara's eyes never stopped moving, cataloging faces, exits, and potential threats in what appeared to be automatic behavior. When he mentioned the base's proximity to several villages, her pupils dilated slightly, a stress response he'd seen in soldiers carrying invisible wounds. Our mission here is straightforward, Hassan explained to the group. We maintain communications for regional operations and provide logistical support. It's not glamorous work, but it's vital. He caught Zara's almost imperceptible sigh of relief. After dismissing the group, Hassan found himself curious about his new communications specialist. Her file showed standard training, basic radio operations, encryption protocols. Nothing extraordinary. Yet everything about her screamed advanced training. The way she unconsciously positioned herself for optimal tactical advantage, how her eyes tracked movement patterns of personnel around the base, the slight callus on her right index finger that suggested extensive keyboard work rather than standard military equipment. That evening, as Zara unpacked her sparse belongings in the women's quarters, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe here, in this quiet outpost handling routine communications, she could finally sleep without hearing the voices of terrorists planning atrocities. Maybe she could forget the weight of knowing too much, of carrying secrets that had slowly eaten away at her soul. Her roommate, Corporal Fatima, chatted cheerfully about base life. But Zara found herself analyzing vocal patterns and accent markers, despite herself a reflex she couldn't quite shut off. She forced herself to focus on Fatima's words rather than the linguistic clues that would normally reveal region of origin, education level, and potential security clearance. As she settled into her narrow bunk, Zara whispered a quiet prayer that this assignment would give her what 8 years in intelligence had taken away: peace, normalcy, and perhaps the chance to remember who she used to be before she became someone who could identify a person's hometown from their pronunciation of a single word. 3 weeks into her assignment, Zara had successfully maintained her facade of being just another communications technician. She arrived early, completed her tasks efficiently, and avoided drawing attention. The routine radio checks and supply coordination reports were exactly the mind-numbing work she craved until the morning. Colonel Hassan decided to inject some humor into the weekly briefing. Before we discuss this week's patrol schedules, Hassan announced to the assembled staff, I'd like to acknowledge our newest team member. Sergeant Khalil has been doing outstanding work in communications, though I have to say, with her exciting background in basic radio maintenance, I'm surprised she hasn't shared any thrilling stories about antenna repairs. The room chuckled appreciatively. Several officers turned to look at Zara expectantly, waiting for the typical nervous laugh or self-deprecating response that usually followed such gentle ribbing. Instead, Zara straightened in her chair and responded in flawless Mandarin, her tone carrying the formal diplomatic register used in high-level government communications. Some backgrounds are better left unexamined. particularly when national security considerations supersede personal comfort. The laughter died instantly. The room fell into stunned silence as everyone processed what they had just heard, not just the perfect pronunciation, but the sophisticated grammatical structures and cultural formality that indicated extensive training at the highest levels. Got Captain Omar Rashid, seated near the back of the room, felt his pulse quicken. He had spent 4 years as a military attaché at the embassy in Beijing, and he recognized that particular accent immediately. It wasn't the Mandarin learned in language schools or through immersion programs. This was the precise Beijing dialect taught only to intelligence operatives destined for the most sensitive diplomatic and espionage work. Hassan's jovial expression shifted to something more serious. "Sergeant, that was ... unexpected." Zara's face flushed as she realized her mistake. Years of training had kicked in automatically when she felt cornered, and she had responded as her former self, the woman who had sat across from foreign officials and parsed every nuance of their communications for hidden meanings. "My apologies." "Sir," she said quietly in English, "I studied languages as a hobby before enlisting." But Omar wasn't buying the deflection. No hobby produced that level of fluency, and certainly not the specific diplomatic register she had used. He found himself studying her more carefully, the way she held herself, how her eyes automatically tracked movement patterns, the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested someone perpetually ready for threats. After the briefing, as people filed out with whispered conversations about the mysterious sergeant, Omar approached her workstation. "That was impressive Mandarin," he said casually. "I spent some time in China myself. Your pronunciation of Gorda Antran was particularly professional." Zara's hand stilled over her keyboard. He had just referenced her use of the term. National security in Chinese, something only someone with diplomatic or intelligence experience would have. Caught and understood the significance of to with Kawad Akalalai Wawajet Amakawarway or a phrase I picked up, she replied. Not meeting his eyes, Omar nodded slowly. Of course. Though I have to say, it's rare to encounter someone who learned Beijing diplomatic protocol as a hobby. He paused meaningfully, especially someone who chose to transfer to basic communications work. Zara finally looked up, and Omar saw something flicker in her expression, a mixture of fear, resignation, and perhaps the smallest hint of relief at being seen. For just a moment, the carefully constructed mask slipped, and he glimpsed the intelligent, haunted woman hiding beneath. Omar found himself watching Zara with growing fascination over the following days. What he had initially mistaken for standard military bearing was actually something far more complex, the controlled movements of someone trained to blend in while remaining perpetually alert for danger. During a routine equipment check, he deliberately struck up a conversation in Arabic, then smoothly switched to Farsi, and finally to French. Each time, Zara responded naturally before catching herself, her fluency evident despite her attempts to appear confused. By his count, she was perfectly fluent in at least 6 languages, possibly more. You're testing me, she said finally, setting down the radio she'd been inspecting. They were alone in the communications bunker, the steady hum of equipment providing white noise cover for their conversation. Can you blame me? Omar replied. Most radio technicians don't speak Farsi with a Tehran accent, or use French diplomatic syntax when they're supposedly stumbling through basic phrases. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the desk, patterns Omar recognized as Arabic script. She was writing unconsciously, probably processing stress through muscle memory of her native language. "What gave it away first?" she asked wearily. "The Mandarin was what made me pay attention, but it was how you responded to the maintenance request from the village elder yesterday that convinced me. You translated his dialect perfectly, including cultural context that isn't found in any textbook." Zara closed her eyes. "I was hoping no one here would speak Pashto. 7 years intercepting communications in Afghanistan." Omar guessed gently. 8 years. Multiple theaters. She looked at him directly for the first time since their conversation began. "I have what they call perfect auditory recall. I can identify someone's hometown, education level, and sometimes their occupation from a 30-second conversation. I can remember every voice I've ever heard, place them years later from a single word." Omar felt a chill as he understood the implications. "Intelligence work. You were listening to when? Enemy communications, Allied intercepts, interrogation recordings." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "For 8 years, I listened to people plan terrible things. I heard their voices as they discussed killing civilians, targeting schools, coordinating attacks. I remember every threat, every horrific detail, every voice." The weight of her revelation settled between them. Omar had worked intelligence peripherally during his diplomatic service, but he couldn't imagine the psychological toll of being humanity's early warning system. Carrying the burden of knowledge about attacks that might be prevented or might slip through despite her efforts. "Why did you leave?" he asked softly. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water bottle. "There was a school bombing in Kabul. We intercepted the communications planning it. I recognized 3 voices from previous operations, could have identified the cell's location within hours, but the intelligence was delayed in processing. By the time it reached operational units," she stopped, unable to continue. Omar understood. She had known an attack was coming, had the information that could have stopped it, but bureaucratic delays had made her knowledge useless. The guilt of survival, of knowing, of being unable to act would be devastating. "That's when I requested transfer to the most boring assignment I could find," she continued. "I just wanted to stop hearing those voices in my head, stop analyzing every conversation for hidden threats. I wanted to be normal, but you can't turn it off, can you?" Omar observed, noting how she had automatically cataloged the approach of footsteps outside their bunker. "No," she admitted. "I still hear patterns everywhere, still catch linguistic markers that reveal more than people intend to share. I know that Corporal Fatima grew up in refugee camps from her accent variations, and that Colonel Hassan learned Arabic as an adult, because he doesn't use certain grammatical shortcuts that native speakers develop in childhood." Omar marveled at the isolation this must create constantly. Knowing more about people than they revealed, carrying the burden of unwanted insights into everyone around her. Over the following weeks, Omar made excuses to work near the communications center. He told himself it was professional curiosity, but truthfully, he was drawn to Zara's quiet intelligence and the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. Unlike others who might be intimidated by her extraordinary abilities, he found himself fascinated by the mind that could process such complex information. Their friendship developed gradually through shared meals and evening conversations. Omar discovered that beneath Zara's hypervigilance lay someone desperate for normal human connections, someone who wanted to discuss books and music instead of threat assessments and linguistic analysis. "I used to love languages," she confessed one evening as they walked the perimeter during her off-duty hours. "Before the military, I thought about becoming a translator for international aid organizations. Languages were beautiful to me, different ways of seeing the world, expressing emotions, connecting with people." "What changed?" Omar asked, though he suspected he knew. "When your job is to find hidden meanings in every word, to identify deception and danger, languages stop being beautiful. They become weapons, tools, sources of vital intelligence." She paused near the observation post. "I can't hear a conversation anymore without automatically analyzing vocal stress patterns and searching for coded references." Omar noticed how she instinctively positioned herself with clear sightlines, how her eyes tracked movement in her peripheral vision. "Do you ever sleep?" "Not well," she admitted. "I have nightmares about voices I couldn't identify in time, conversations I should have caught, connections I missed. Sometimes I wake up convinced I'm hearing terrorist communications through the walls." It was then that Omar realized he was falling for this brilliant, damaged woman who carried invisible wounds from years of protecting others. He began staying up with her during her difficult nights, bringing tea and sitting quietly while she worked through panic attacks, triggered by random sounds that resembled intercepted transmissions.
You don't have to take care of me.
Zara protested one night after waking from a nightmare about a bombing she had helped prevent 3 years earlier. "I'm not taking care of you," Omar replied gently. "I'm choosing to be here because I care about you." The distinction mattered to Zara, who had spent years being valued only for her abilities rather than herself. Omar saw her as a person worthy of love, not just a useful intelligence asset. Their relationship deepened when a routine communication interception revealed potential hostile activity near the base. Zara's eyes widened as she listened to the transmission, her training automatically engaging despite her attempts to remain disengaged from intelligence work. "Omar," she said urgently, pulling him aside. "That voice pattern in the intercepted transmission, I recognize it from operations in Syria. This isn't local militia. It's organized, probably foreign-trained. The speaker has formal military training based on his communication protocols." Her analysis proved correct when aerial reconnaissance confirmed organized hostile forces in the area. Her identification of the threat level allowed base commanders to adjust security posture appropriately. "Potentially saving lives." "You saved us," Omar said afterward. Finding her sitting alone in the communications center, staring at the radio equipment. "I swore I was done with this," she whispered. "I came here to escape, to be normal, to stop being responsible for other people's lives." Omar took her hands gently. "You are more than your abilities, Zara. But those abilities are part of who you. Rue can't simply turn off caring about people's safety. Maybe the goal isn't to escape what you're good at, but to find a way to use those skills without destroying yourself." For the first time since arriving at the base, Zara felt understood rather than simply useful. 6 months after Zara's arrival, a black sedan arrived at Forward Operating Base Phoenix unannounced. Director Mansour emerged, his presence immediately recognizing by base intelligence staff. Omar watched from across the compound as Zara's face went pale, her carefully constructed peace shattered by the appearance of her former handler. Sergeant Khalil Mansour's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "We need to talk." Omar followed at a discreet distance, as Mansour led Zara to a secure briefing room. Through the partially open door, he heard fragments of urgent conversation, critical national security, unique abilities required, and terrorist cell planning imminent attack. When Zara emerged an hour later, she looked shaken. Omar found her in their usual evening spot, near the observation post, staring at the horizon. "They want me back," she said, without preamble. "There's a cell planning something catastrophic, multiple coordinated attacks across 3 countries. Intelligence agencies have intercepted communications, but the speakers are using advanced vocal modification techniques. Traditional analysis can't identify them." Omar's stomach tightened, knowing where this was heading. "Do what I can," Zara continued. "Vocal modification can't completely mask certain linguistic markers: childhood accent formation, educational patterns, regional dialect influences. I've heard these voices before years ago. I can identify at least 3 members of the cell despite their technological countermeasures." "What did you tell Mansour?" Omar asked carefully, that I needed time to think. Zara turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the inner turmoil. "He says if I don't help, innocent people will die. Hundreds, possibly thousands. They've identified the cell's general location. But without knowing who specifically they're looking for, operational units can't intervene effectively." Omar struggled with conflicting emotions. He understood the weight of her decision lives hanging in the balance. Her unique abilities potentially the key to preventing tragedy. But he also saw what intelligence work had done to her, how it had nearly destroyed her mental health and sense of self. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I want to say no," she whispered. I want to continue building a life here with you, where I'm not responsible for preventing disasters, where I can sleep without hearing the voices of people planning atrocities. But you can't, Omar realized, seeing the resignation in her expression. How can I live with myself knowing I could have helped prevent an attack? How can I choose my personal happiness over other people's lives? Tears filled her eyes. You know what the terrible irony is? I have these abilities because I care about protecting people. I can't use that as an excuse to stop protecting people. Omar pulled her close, feeling her trembling against his chest. If you go back, will you be able to return here? To us? I don't know, she admitted. Mansour says it's a short-term assignment, but we both know how these things work. One critical mission becomes another and another. The world always needs saving. They stood in silence for several minutes, both understanding that this moment represented a crossroads. Omar realized that loving Zara meant supporting her decision, even if it meant losing her. I'll wait, he said finally. However long it takes, whatever you decide. But I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll come back to yourself. Don't let them turn you into just a tool again. Remember that you're a person who deserves happiness, who deserves love, who has value beyond her usefulness to others. Zara kissed him softly, tasting salt from tears she didn't realize she was crying. I promise to try. The next morning, as she packed her single duffel bag for the second time in 6 months, Zara felt the weight of returning to a world she had tried to escape. But this time, she carried something new, the knowledge that someone loved her for who she was, not what she could do, and would be waiting for her return. As the black sedan drove away from Forward Operating Base Phoenix, Omar watched until it disappeared, already counting the days until Zara could come home to the quiet life they had begun to build together.